And now the news is good with Matthew Martin.
I'm Matthew Martin, and the news is good. Tonight, what's the deal with Jethro? The family and I always watch Ten Commandments and Prince of Egypt around this time of year. I love both movies, and I especially love the way the Prince of Egypt depicts the parting of the Red Sea. It's breathtaking. If you haven't seen it, sit down with your kids and watch it tonight. Or if you don't have kids, watch it yourself. Neither movie limits itself to the material written by Moses. The Exodus account doesn't give you much about Moses' early life. It does stay relatively faithful to the details found in the second book of the Bible, though. I could quibble about some things, but overall, it's solid, which is better than can be said of many big-budget retellings of Bible events. One thing the movie changed, though, was the fact that Moses, after fleeing Egypt, ended up in the house of Jethro, described in the Bible as a priest of Midian, who lived near Mount Sinai. It was in those days that he encountered the burning bush and received his commission to return to Egypt. Now, most of that is how it's depicted in Moses' inspired account, but with two changes in the movie. In the movie, not very much time passes, maybe 6 years or so it seems. In reality, 40 years pass between the time Moses leaves Egypt and the time he returns. The movie condenses the timeline, and as a result, it makes one other change to compensate. In the movie, Moses finds Jethro. In reality, Moses found Reuel, the prince of Midian, whose daughter he married, Exodus 2, 16 through 21. In the 40 years he was there, Reuel was replaced as a priest by Jethro, Exodus 3:1. But wait! Jethro, not Reuel, is called Moses' father-in-law in Exodus 3 verse 1. But it was Reuel who gave one of his daughters to Moses. So, what's up with that? There are two possibilities. First possibility is that Reuel is Jethro, just by another name. And contextually that works. The man gave Moses one of his daughters, and so he would be Moses' father-in-law. And that's Reuel in Exodus 2, and that's Jethro in Exodus 3. So they're the same guy, different name. Second possibility is that Jethro is Reuel's brother or maybe even son, since the Bible calls someone father, even if they are technically a grandfather, etc. The title was less about where the man fits in the family tree and more about the position of authority that he holds over the family as a patriarch. At the same time, the word translated as father-in-law in Exodus 3:1 is a pretty open-ended phrase and can describe pretty much any relation that you have by marriage. In other words, your brother-in-law, your son-in-law, your father-in-law, even your husband are all different people, but the word to describe them is the same word in the Hebrew language quite often. So which is he? Is Jethro the same man as Reuel, or is he some relation to the former priest of Midian? I don't know. Another question people often ask about Jethro concerns his Midianite heritage. He's a priest of Midian, so does that mean he's a pagan? After all, when we read about the Midianites in later books, such as Numbers and Judges, they're enemies of God's people, worshippers of false gods. Jehovah orders them to be wiped out because they led the people into paganism at Baal Peor, Numbers 25 and I think Numbers 31. So what kind of man is Jethro if that's the company that he keeps? Well, actually, that's not the company he keeps. The Midianites were a nomadic people with no central government. Jethro was not a pagan. He was a worshiper of Yahweh. In fact, while his name means eminent, the name Reuel, which is either his other name or the name of his family, blah, 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 that word means friend of God. When Moses reunited with Jethro after the Exodus was done, the priest of Midian offered worship to Yahweh for the good that he did for his people in Egypt, Exodus 18. Jethro lived in the patriarchal age at a time when God dealt directly with heads of households. The fact that he was a priest of Midian does not mean he was a priest of false religion, but rather that he was a priest of God of Midianite descent, which in fact means he's related to Abraham through Keturah. It would not be until the nation of Israel is formally founded at Sinai that God would set them aside to be his people, separate from all other nations. Jethro, in that sense, was no different from someone like Melchizedek, who was a priest of Salem, Genesis 14. So there you have it. About 5 minutes of words spoken about Jethro, whether you wanted it or not. I had no real point to this. I was just thinking about it and thought I'd help you with it. So, okay, go along with your day. Thank you, Matthew. We now go live to our special correspondent out on the field. Thank you, Matthew. Today's Bible reading comes from Acts chapter 4, verse number 29, which reads, "And now, Lord, behold their threatenings, and grant unto your servants that with all boldness they may speak your word." This is actually right in the middle of a prayer being uttered by Peter and John, right after they have been threatened for preaching the gospel. in the temple area. And instead of just listening to the authorities and kowtowing to the authorities or running away in terror, they first utter a prayer to God in advance of them going back to preach more boldly in more places where they will be threatened, if not attacked again. But it's their prayers' words that strike me. Again, I'll read it to you. Lord, behold their threatenings, and grant your servants with all boldness we may speak your word. There's two things going on there. Peter and John say, give us boldness to preach your gospel, knowing we're going to be attacked for doing so. But then they also say, behold their threats. You, God, take care of them. We're not going to deal with them. They're for you to deal with. For us to do is to preach your message. So give us boldness while you handle those who come against us. A good prayer for all of us to remember in these trying times. It is Tuesday, March 24th, and my prayer for you today is that you will bask in the sunlight. Not that sun. That sun is bright and oppressive and it blinds, but there is another kind of sunlight. Ironically though, this other kind of sunlight is metaphorically described as like the sun. Malachi chapter 4 talks about the coming Messiah as a sunrise in the morning with healing in his wings. You think about the sun that rises in the sky every dawn and it sheds its beams over the world and it spreads its light rays all over the horizon. And that's like spreading the wings of light over the day. Well, Malachi says the Messiah is coming and he is going to spread the wings of his light all over the world. And he invites the world to bask in that light. So my prayer for you is that you will stop what you're doing, take a moment and appreciate that you live in the era of the Messiah, that era that Malachi only hinted at, only looked forward to. You get to experience it. Malachi, after he finished writing, the world ushered into a period of darkness, the metaphorical kind, a time in which God's inspiration ceased for 350 years, give or take. Other things happened and God was still at work and things were going on, but inspired writing stopped until John the Baptizer comes onto the scene and John says, here comes the Messiah and his kingdom comes with him. Prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. As Malachi said, it's about to be dawn. So my prayer for you is that you will appreciate that you live in the era of the dawn, the perpetual sunrise of Jesus Christ. God bless.